All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody to another live session of This Week in Drones. We shifted it to Monday today as we are, I think, right in Thanksgiving week. So happy Thanksgiving, of course, to everyone out there. And thanks for joining us here right at about lunchtime for most folks, maybe breakfast if you're coming from the West Coast here on a Monday. Right at towards, kind of get in the middle of a big quarter for a lot of people, as probably most folks out there that are involved in drones, drone detection, drone mitigation, or as we're talking about today, TAC, this single pane of glass where you can pull all of that together into one picture. If you're involved in this industry, if you're like me, you've probably been getting a lot of phone calls over the last couple days, over the last couple weeks, but man, this week has been crazy. My day job over at Echodyne, we're just getting calls off the hook regarding all these grants, right? All this money going out, and the deadlines are so short for getting counter UAS, drone detection, equipment, training, software, all the things in place in the next few months so that we're ready for summer 2026 for FIFA at so many major cities, 9, 10, major cities in the US that are going to be hosting FIFA World Cup. And then not too long after that, a year or two later, right, the Olympics 2028 hitting AJ's hometown as well. So with that said, just a tiny bit of context for you guys. I want to go around and do introductions, and we're gonna go in order. I'm going to share. Josh is going to share a little bit. Michelle's going to share a little bit of a background and give you guys the lens that we're approaching this as common hosts here on the podcast. But our special guests, I'm going to end with them. To go to AJ and then to Greg, and I just wanted to highlight these guys because they are experts in TAC itself, and they're deploying this all over the place, and you can learn a little bit more about them as we go. But if you have questions about how TAC works, how radars detect drones, how interoperability works with Michelle, all these different things, please send them in while we are here live together. It's way more fun as you guys interact. I'll pull up your questions as I can, if I can find a slot to get in there. As people, once we get going, I'm going to pull your questions up. We're going to deep dive and hopefully add as much value as we possibly can, because the deadlines are just crunching. They're just so short right now for needing to get equipment deployed and quoted and all that stuff. So with that said, I'll stop there. I'm going to pass it to Josh, do a brief intro, give you context as to the lens he's bringing to this conversation, and then the great Michelle Duquette, and then we'll go to AJ and then Greg. Go for it, Josh.
Everybody, great to see you. As with David, I'm also a host of This Week in Drones and also work with Echodyne. So the lens I'm bringing is more from that sensor perspective, both on the radar side, but also just that sensor ecosystem with remote ID, RF detection. What are those sensors that then are displayed in TAC, and bringing a little bit of that color to the conversation, and hopefully give for some of the folks who are coming just new to the conversation, don't necessarily know that much about sensors or what are the ways you actually detect drones, give a little color to the folks who are just starting out. Michelle, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Michelle Duquette, private consultant now. The lens that I'm bringing here today is all about interoperability. Those of you that know me are probably sick to death of hearing me say that word. However, I feel very strongly that TAC has a place in enabling interoperability for future scaling. So that is the lens I'll be bringing to this discussion today. AJ?
Hi, Andreas Johansson. Most folks call me AJ. 32-year fire service professional. We've been using TAC at our organization at Corona Fire for the last 7 years. Use it across all hazards hazmat, UAS, counter UAS, wildfires, you name it. That's really the lens I'm bringing it in, is kind of a foundation, like Michelle said, for interoperability and collaboration.
And AJ, did you have that quote that you were sharing earlier backstage? I thought that was pretty profound.
Yeah, if you've read Team of Teens from General McChrystal, he brings up a kind of a term in there called shared consciousness, and talks about them being in Afghanistan and how if they wanted to defeat a network, they needed a network of their own. When I read that, I thought, man, that really embodies what TAC is. Fuse data together so we can all be on the same sheet of music and and hopefully go out and make for a better outcome.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ. Greg.
Hey everyone, yeah, happy to be here. Greg Albrecht. I'm a tax SME like AJ. I've worked on the EMS side of the fire side in my life, but I support a lot of TAC deployments for NSSE and SEER events. So think your Super Bowls, your FIFAs, your World Cups, your State of the Unions, your inaugurations, things of that nature. We've deployed TAC into all of those environments across multiple different agencies, across multiple different echelons. Right now, we're doing a lot of support for UAS, small UAS and counter UAS, especially because we have a lot of those events coming up, out here on the West Coast, but really all over the country and even into Canada and Mexico coming up in the next couple of years. So really looking at how we can advise different agencies and organizations in deploying both counter UAS and the TTPs, the tactics that they need to utilize counter UAS in those environments.
That's awesome. And Greg, before we kind of deep dive, since you've had so much hands-on experience with this, and even in your past history, you were sharing backstage of just a ton of experience going to these major SEER 1 events. Why TAC? Just in a nutshell for people out there. First of all, just and this is getting a little bit into AJ's world, but just what in the world is TAK? What is TAC? Just so that people have a clue while they're tapping in. I'm sure a lot of folks know, but for those who don't, but just like why are people asking for this? Why why not just go without it? Just for in a quick kind of nutshell for folks.
Yeah. So you cognitively you only have so much bandwidth, and additionally the systems you're using to communicate are bound by that. So when I'm using a radio as a responder, I only have a channel, and I can only have, if you think about span of control, right? If I have 8 people on a channel, only so many people can talk at any given time. So if we look at the types of communication that we're sending across radio channels, typically, we can offload a lot of that onto TAC, right? Where are you? What are you doing? Right? We don't need to send that over the air. We can save the radio for things that require a human in the loop. Otherwise, we can use a situational awareness tool like TAC to share user information, i.e. Blue Force tracking, sensor information, status information, and chat, and free up those other those other communication modalities for things that require a human in the loop. So really that's what TAC's enabling for us, is a bandwidth increasing system for us. Separately from that, if we look back historically at what we were supposed to get out of both P25 on the public safety radio side and FirstNet, it was supposed to enable this sort of interoperability panacea. Unfortunately, both of those systems, right, were dictated by organizations, by working groups, and pushed down to us as first responders. And what we're seeing with TAC is the de facto situational awareness interoperability tool exists today in TAC, right? It may not look like TAC in the future. It doesn't even have to have TAC in the name, but using that as sort of your base layer for interoperability is sort of the groundswell that we need for situational awareness interoperability as first responders. And hey, today we're using it for fire response and EMS and those types of things. But moving forward, there's nothing that we can't shove into TAC, right? It's the and platform.
Beautiful. Well, with that said, folks, if you want to start sending in some comments, and if you have questions, thoughts, but also I'd love to hear in a nutshell what sensors you might be used to seeing out there, what you're deploying. Is it radios? Is it radars? Is it remote ID? Other things, on here this week in drones, we're going to focus primarily on counter UAS or drone detection, elements like that. But if you are out there and you have a sensor that you envision being part of the stack that's involved at one of these games during a FIFA World Cup game, throw it in the comments, because we'd love to be able to start to kind of speak to each of those elements as well as we chat. But with that said, and it looks like we already have a handful of questions. I wasn't getting the little notification, but thanks folks out there for already jumping in and saying hi. With that said, I just want to step back for a second, give a little more context, and then we're going to go right into AJ about what in the world is TAC, why is it foundational, because we're kind of talking around it, but he's going to say what exactly it is. And then we're going to kind of flesh out what Greg was talking about, how TAC can be leveraged for this counter UAS mission. But back to my kind of intro, as you guys, if anyone wants to throw in more comments about what sensors you're putting out there. But for me, and Josh, it's more on the radar side for detecting drones. And man, it's just been a frenzy. And why that matters, why I'm going back to that is it's so many different platforms that are deploying even just our one sensor. We're talking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different agencies in the same city that might be running different software platforms where they're bringing the radar in with the camera with the remote ID, right? And all of these are colliding. Everyone needs to submit for funding yesterday, or literally Friday, this last Friday, and then probably more deadlines to come. And so everyone's scrambling. Hey, give me a quote for this, give me a quote for that, and it's running through so many different parties. It's going to be such a mishmash of different sensors and things all smashed into the same city. But I think it can work together. But man, we're going to see that collision, coming kind of front and center, right? So I just want to kind of share that. And if you're seeing that, throw that in the comments too, because I think it's been kind of a wild time. But
you're absolutely right, David. I mean, on my other hat I wear working for CTI Parsons in our solution support division, we get this request a lot. We've got 4 different, even folks that are using TAC already. Hey, we have 4 different disparate TAC server systems. We need to start even getting them connected. So it's not just, hey, we're using TAC, is that I need my team who's on this TAC server to talk to this TAC server. So, and that is a lot. We've got federal, state, and local. They're all using data into their TAC server, but even then, that's a lot of the work we do on the CTI Parsons side on the TAC efforts, not just plugins and other, system integrations. It's just getting TAC servers to talk to each other as well.
Wow. It's like the Spider-Man image of your Spider-Man, your Spider-Man, your Spider. All
yeah, and the great thing about TAC is it has that federation and Fed hub already talked about. So you don't have to abandon everything that you have in your TAC system. We can get the systems to talk together.
Man.
So there's
from a technical
stuff.
That's great. Awesome, man. Well, so I'd love to hear, Michelle has a comment, and then I'd love to just define what TAC, what it means, what it is. But yeah, Michelle, please jump in there.
I want to just kind of take a pause with what AJ just said. He talked about the different TAC servers. So there are different platforms. When I talk about interoperability, I mean all of it. I mean the fact that TAC has multiple servers right now that don't necessarily get along great. What we need to do is have that be transparent at the user end. It shouldn't matter which TAC server you're using, and it shouldn't matter what that other department coming into this region of responsibility, what they're using either. It shouldn't matter. That's interoperability. It's not just interoperability of situational awareness, but also of the technical layers and also of the policies and the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures that support this technology, that interoperability, all of that. When I say that word, it means all those things.
Love it. Awesome. All right, AJ, do you mind just level setting for anyone listening into this podcast? Michelle certainly brings TAC weaves it in, but we haven't truly deep dived it for our listeners as to just simplify it, even for like a, kind of middle schooler or whatever, however you look at that, just like a 5th grader. What is TAC?
AJ's a firefighter. Explain it for other firefighters.
There you go. I mean, what does TAC even mean? TAC. Like, let's even go there, and then just like a brief explanation of the technology.
Yeah, so TAC is an acronym. It's perfect for this, right? Like in the military or law enforcement or fire, right? We love our acronyms, but it stands for, on the civilian side, the Team Awareness Kit. It is a product of the DoD. They call it the Tactical Assault Kit. But programmed for about 15 years now, came out of the Air Force Research Lab to really solve close air support. So they had a bad incident where an airman had a malfunctioning piece of equipment, dropped an ordnance right on their location. So right ordnance, talked to the right aircraft, and it just landed on them instead of where they wanted it to go. And so that spun out of that a really a small kind of R&D effort of just, I need to know where I am, and I need to know where the enemy is, and I need to know where that ordnance is on some sort of digital mapping interface, so this doesn't happen again. And that has spun out into really what TAC is today, is this like I mentioned before, shared consciousness. I can fuse all this information onto one map and to see where I'm at, where my friends are at, and where that is. And that is really the exponent. Really, that can be anything. That is the variable. Is that the counter EOS threat? Is that a friendly threat? Where is the radar at? What is the floor plan of this building? What does the topography look like? I mean, it really, and with this plugin architecture, you can do all of this stuff. It's open to really, it's an open platform for you to use. And since it really wasn't built for any specific mission, it's ubiquitous. I mean, all of those things we really care about. Where am I? Where are they? Where is that? I don't care what mission you go on. Those are kind of the core, especially what Greg mentioned when you're trying to do, when you hear things on the radio and you're trying to understand where is this occurring, it really reduces that radio traffic a lot. You don't have to now explain, especially I would say like when you're not on the corner of Smith and 6th Street and you don't have a really good way of explaining where things are at, and you can put it on a map, it just cues everybody in immediately. So imagine, your radar system picking up an anomaly, and now you're classifying it as a threat, and now imagine trying to do that over the radio to explain where that is, right? That just would be so hard. Now we put that on a map. Now you know if we find the operator, who the closest people are to go interdict that person. When you're just talking about basic, non-kinetic, defeat, just going down and finding the operator, not even talking about like, RF jamming or anything like that, or GPS jamming, just to send someone over, just to talk to that person and say, you need to land your drone. Imagine trying to coordinate that over a bunch of different systems. Well, I have one system where it shows where my officers are, and this pane of glass shows where the RF signature is, and this one shows where the drone is. TAC really solves all of that.
And with that said, correct me if I'm wrong here, but folks can still use their own software that they're used to using, that they purchase, that they think works really well, that looks great, to tell them their mission, right? And so it's not replacing. TAC isn't now being sold instead of all these separate systems. I want to make that clear.
Greg mentioned the AND kit. This is about 2 years ago. We were at a conference, and we're really trying to push the point that like you don't have to replace anything you have with TAC. You can bring TAC in as another tool. But so we took Team Awareness Kit to the AND kit, because there's a lot of things people get threatened, or they think like, well, if I'm going to use this, what am I getting rid of? And you really don't have to. Now, eventually, if that does replace something, there's some redundancy. But I tell people, kick the tires on TAC first, bring it in as just another application you can use. We can switch apps really quick, but it does allow you to consolidate stuff. And sure, maybe TAC doesn't do exactly the thing you need to do in its native app. Switch apps when you need to maybe get a higher fidelity view of some certain thing. Maybe our radar intersection.
Oh, sorry, Michelle, I saw you come off mute. And then AJ, while you're talking about maps, feel free to pull up that image of the map that you had, because I thought that was really helpful. Michelle, go for it.
While I'm commenting. So I want to draw the tie very clearly between the TAC ecosystem, public safety, and aviation, specifically UAS traffic management. So what you heard AJ say is TAC basically tells the folks on the ground, the boots on the ground, where I am, where my friends are, and where that thing is. So if I translate that into aviation speak, it's own ship, where am I within orientation of this airspace? Where are you? Where that is, what is the intruder within my well-cleared bubble? And then what is that? That is detect and avoid, all of the other things that we need to have situational awareness about. And I use that term situational awareness literally because it does mean slightly different things with these two environments. So TAC is not a replacement for UAS traffic management. It's an augmentation that allows the two communities to be able to communicate with each other in real time when they have to. I just want to make that clear. And I've heard it so many times from the folks in the UTM environment. Oh, they say TAC is a situational awareness tool, and it doesn't do half the stuff we need it to do. Well, it's not intended to do half the stuff you need it to do as an aviator. But let's be clear, it has absolutely all of the critical elements that's needed for public safety on the ground. And the two of you, those two sectors, absolutely have to have awareness of what each other is doing when you're in the same proximity. Over.
Did this pop up?
Oh, I got you. Go back to your map. And voila. That gives people a little bit of a...
Yeah. So this is the Android version, just a landscape shot of this is actually yesterday at the F1 race in Vegas. So when you're talking about, especially large events that are covering a large area, this is a good example where we've got the race course on here. We've got users, we've got sensors. This is CBRN sensors on the map. And really, you can do whatever you want. I mentioned before, TAC is unlocked for you to really fuse any data you want into it. This is just some pictures, both the iOS client on the right using TAC Aware, and the one in the middle on the left is the Android version. We're oriented in portrait mode here, but this is just doing some basic counter UAS remote ID detections. And where is the aircraft, and then where's the operator controller at? So, and this is just the basic stuff. This is just a local remote ID controller in your hand connected to TAC, and you can see here on this picture on the left, they're getting like 30 miles off that detection.
Nice. And then again, that could bring in all sorts of sensors, right? And that's the point. It's
yeah. On the right there, those little pink objects. Those are remote ID detections as well. We can bring in fuse in crewed aircraft. I mean, really, there's nothing we can't get in there as long as you have access to the data. Guy like Greg, who is excellent at fusing all of this data into TAC.
Actually, that's a great segue. Greg, you've been nodding quite a bit, and you made a comment on the back channel there that I want to hear more about maps and the number of maps that someone's looking at. And again, for context, I don't want to get lost on this. There's going to be a FIFA World Cup game in, Atlanta, or many games, right, and practices and things. And so it's going to be, as an example, in one city there, you're going to need local PD, county, state, city, and then who knows, all these 3-letter agencies between FBI and all the folks involved there, they're all going to have to find a way to work together. And that's not just the workshops and who to call and what, and what sensors they're deploying. They're going to need some way very quickly, very soon in the next couple of months to find a way to have situational awareness of each other, right? You've got that drone over there, you've got that radar over there, and it's all different systems and they all need to be able to talk. Anyway, so with that said, how many maps are they going to be looking at? Is the FBI going to be looking at 6 different ones? Or are they all going to have their own and then have to radio, hey, I see this on my map. Oh, interesting. I don't see that on mine. That's going to get clunky really fast, right? So yeah, Greg, I mean, any thoughts you have, but I mean, great point about the number of maps people are looking at. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 points I was making on the back end are, as the responder in the field, I know what data it is that I need. I'm the most qualified, me, AJ, whoever it is, right? They are the most qualified to determine what data it is that they need. If that's not available to them, they're not able to complete their mission, whatever their mission might be. So we need to be able to put that in their hands. Now, are they going to have all of those layers turned on at the same time? Who knows, right? Depends on the mission profile they're in. But we need to enable that capability for the first responder, the responder in the field, or the unit member. The other part of that is, and this is informed by my own experience. If you've ever had, a tool with dots on a map, Blue Force tracking, situation awareness tool, or whatever, and then try to pull up Google Earth or Google Maps and try to correlate that in your mind, it's hard. It sucks. You hate it. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? So what I said was, if you're looking at a map, you should be looking at TAC, right? Because in that sense, you are already geo-referenced. You already have a geo-reference, right? You already have geolocation. You're not having to figure out where the street corner is in the real world, right? So if you're looking at a map, you should be looking at TAC. And if you're looking at more than one map, you're looking at too many maps, right? You can't do that in your head. You let the computer do the hard work in that scenario. And that's what we're enabling with TAC. We're letting the computer do the hard work.
That's brilliant. Michelle, you're nodding. I don't know. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I absolutely love both the simplicity and the complexity that TAC brings to my world. So when I first was introduced to it, I saw dots on a screen and I thought, well, yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. We, on the aviation side, have very robust technologies that we've had for years. Our situation displays that are very, very visual and graphic and complex, and they give me all the things that I need. And then I was educated. And then I realized, wow, there is a whole lot of opportunity and possibility with the aviation community in this public safety TAC capability. It's more than just dots on a screen. Those dots on a screen have very explicit intelligence attached to them for those people on the ground. Me looking at it from the outside, well, that's not productive. Them looking at it on the inside, worlds of information being offered to them in a very simplistic, easy to action format. And then they started adding layers. And they started adding layers that made more and more sense to me in my aviation mind on the things that define situational awareness for me. And what AJ and I started talking about very early on was, okay, if we could just share this in this way with the aviation community, the small UAS community specifically, they would then get a sense for when there are areas that are public safety prioritized, and we can get back to that conversation a little bit later if we have time, being able to prioritize public safety events, but give that small UAS community the opportunity to actually see that. Most people are going to respect the fact that it's an event that they need to stay out of. Most people will respect that. Yeah, we're going to have some of the careless and clueless and, crazy, an extra C in there, that are going to want to intrude with their own drones. But we've got processes for that, and we're addressing that. But the awareness, that consciousness that AJ described, is now translated in two different languages, the public safety language and the aviation language. That is a bridge. And that, my friends, is how we get to interoperability. So I absolutely love both the simplicity and the complexity of this capability. And I'm just going to keep shouting it.
I want to tie on to that. So I got to hang out with a retired air traffic controller this past weekend who was doing counter UAS for a big festival. And I tried drilling him. I'm like, hey, in this environment, what are the important things for you? But in Michelle, in you describing these sort of, the different headspaces that you need to be in, it almost solidifies it in my mind now, right? This guy's coming from an air traffic control background, right? He's used to dealing with stuff in the air, right? I mean, I can't speak to his job, but like he gave me some insight. But on the fire side, for the most part, or let's say the ground responder side, for the most, we're dealing with stuff on the ground, right? Two very different headspaces. And I'm making the pitch constantly, but TAC is allowing us to sort of merge those two domains, right? Give us the common operating picture that will merge both the airspace domain and the ground and the maritime domain, even, right, if we wanted to. But now we can give those folks a tool that can merge those in their heads, and again, save them from having to look at two different maps. And it gives them the ability to change their perspective, right? They can do a nadir top-down view, or they could slew to a 3D view and actually look at airspace, right? And look at their stack and see how things are stacking up in their airspace and manage it that way. Now, granted, they'll have their own mechanisms for managing it, but until this, there wasn't really a tool for doing that.
Yeah, agreed. And just to make sure we're clear, you're not inferring that this is a replacement for what they need to manage their airspace the way they do according to their rules.
I mean, what is the tool for managing counter UAS or small UAS airspace? I mean, granted, we don't have UTM yet, right? When we have universal UTM, that'll be a thing. But like right now at a large event, there is that. What is the air boss going to use? Like a chart and paper?
Well, David, this is probably another podcast because this for a while. The aviation community, when it comes to the airspace management, has the tools to deconflict aircraft. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I think unfortunately, we have defined these small UAS as aircraft, and we can't always detect them, which is why we're in the conundrum that we're in, and why we need these counter UAS systems, and we need regular detection systems, regular radar, regular sensors, all working together as multiple layers to help us find these things when they're flying where they're not supposed to be.
Totally. And I do want to transition here in just a minute to talk more about how TAC supports all these various sensors, get a little bit more into the sensors themselves, as you were just commenting, Michelle. And then Greg, some of your slides I think would be really useful. So before we go there, I think this and this may be exactly what you were referring to, but I wanted to at least pull up one comment because there's so many of them flying here. Charles Warner and a lot of friends out there making comments. But Alex just said the value of the data on the map is different for different personas. An air boss in a controlled environment will have will value the situational awareness of air and ground sensors more than the agent in the field with their hands full. But the agent's location contribution to the map is key. So it's kind of like different. Everyone's looking at the map for a different reason, and some of them are rolling up way more data than others, right? Or can process way more data. Maybe if they're sitting in a 911 center or something, and they can like sit there and absorb everyone's location, whereas like maybe a specific person on the ground just needs 1 or 2 data points and they can hopefully quickly get those, right? But I don't know if that complements what you're saying, Michelle or Greg, or AJ.
That's the value of layers, right? You turn the layers on that are important to you, and because you can spam a TAC map, you can spam any map or any digital map. You turn on too much stuff, you may miss something. But having the ability to toggle that on when you need it immediately, and like Alex, my friend Alex said right there, is perfect, right? You're contributing to this event, and your location at some point may be very imperative when you call. Especially, we're not getting away from radio. Voice radio is still a thing, but when you call, even just calling in something, immediately people can queue to the map and see where you're at. I mean, just right there, just that voice to map correlation, it can make or break, especially when you're calling for help and you don't know where, how do you describe where I'm at in this festival? I'm by the big Ferris wheel. Well, we got 3 of them. Whatever it is, right? I'm on the south entrance. Well, there's 50 entrances on the south. Whatever it is, you guys get the point here.
100%. We've seen that with like 911 calls and dispatch centers that are using AI to help, right? Where first of all, it'll show the dot of the person's location right when the call is coming in, hopefully, if they have the info. And then as they're talking, it'll say, oh, wow, this is a potential burglary in the home, or whatever the words are that the person's saying. And that can all cue the drone as first responder to launch a drone towards that pin on the map, even using TAC, perhaps, right? I think I saw that
12
example.
hours a day in San Francisco.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw. I was at the recent TAC event that you guys invited me to. Thank you so much. And that was the example I saw on the screen that I thought was impressive. And so the drone is first responder. Drone launches out of the box and can start heading towards that pin before the call is over and the phone is hung up. And so I, now scale that to, as you mentioned, AJ, a person on the radio. Let's say we're in San Francisco at a FIFA World Cup game, and a radar picks up a dark drone that no other sensors picking up, and it's confirmed, and it's like, wow, there's a drone over there, and it's no one else is seeing it. This is not good. I'm going to radio that in, but now the radio location is pinged on there. The location they're referring to, hey, it's hovering right over in area XYZ or whatever. It's all like shown. Someone, Michelle or whoever's there, can like pick up on the screen and see those dots, the radio guy, the drone location from the radar, etc. Right? A couple people are nodding. Michelle, go ahead.
That is for public safety. That's the normalizer, right? It allows all the agencies that are in that particular event space to all be able to have what they're calling, what the things that are important to their situational awareness immediately at their access. And you make that phone call to map, everybody sees it. I don't care if you're from Pasadena and you're coming in to help, you get to see it. And that's how it normalizes across public safety. That's why it's so powerful for the public safety community.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, still staying with this within the same context, still referring to how TAC is this underpinning. And what I want to do, I'm going to pull up a comment that's going to lead us into this. And then I want Josh to share a few words from his perspective on sensors, the sensor stack itself in terms of like counter UAS mission. And then Greg, we'll let you take me and Josh in our comments and pull up some of your thoughts. I'll pull up your slide deck at that point because you have so much experience with using TAC in the real world for the counter UAS mission in particular. And I'd love to kind of hear, like, let's kind of merge those two conversations together. With that said, we got this comment from Mr. Albert. He said, Charles, speaking of Charles Werner, because there's some great banter going back and forth on drone responders and TAC and what they're doing. But he said, are you pointing to it right there?
I'm pointing at the live. I was going to say we have a live detection right now. So I don't know if you guys can see my andon light blinking there. And I have TAC shared on the screen so you can see my live detection. I was hoping this would happen during the webinar, but this is how we monitor it here. We have the andon light go on, and then when you're ready, we can throw it up on the screen and we can actually show what this looks like in TAC live.
Oh, sweet.
Right now.
Do we need to catch it right now while it's hot, or?
Yes.
Okay. Well, read that comment, and it looks like we have an incident right now. So let's see how this works. All right, we'll pull that up the screen. But thank you, Mr. Albert, for talking about how drones and detection and all these sensors are helping deconflict the airspace for counter drone and supporting the law enforcement drones at the same time. Totally agree. Greg, take it away.
Sure. Yeah. So I just so in my background here, I have a light flashing. This is an andon light. It's a Toyota manufacturing technique, but what we're using it for is for alerting us when there's something in our airspace. So I don't know if you can see in my background here, but I have a flashing yellow light. I have amber, red, and green determine the threat level. So I have an unknown drone in my airspace right now, and I'm sharing my screen. I'm not sure how to switch over.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. So what you're seeing right now is in ATAC, or this is actually in WinTAC. We have a remote ID sensor out in the middle of the bay, and it's picking up. Looks like someone's flying their drone out on a field out there, which is, I think that's an okay space for folks to fly. I don't think there's any restrictions out there. But our sensor's picking it up. It's never seen this remote ID before, so it's someone out flying their drone. For whatever reason, they're flying their drone. We're showing both the location of the operator, the location of the drone serial number, and its flight path over time. And then, depending on what sensors and integrations you're doing, you can also go in here and look at, hey, what kind of drone is this, right? We see it's DJI Mavic 2 Zoom. So an older DJI, but it is putting out remote ID. We're able to get that information, the operator information, the platform information, and determining based on our sort of threat profile, what kind of mission we're on, we can, figure out, do we need to send a ground intercept team over here and make contact with the operator? Are they in an okay space? Do we need to switch our nadir view and look at, hey, are they above an altitude that they need to be at based on their altitude data? So I just thought I would show what a live detection looks like in TAC right now.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
so I guess then let's go to Josh for a few comments. As he mentioned in the intro, his lens for this is more so on the actual sensors themselves. Of course, joining the Echodyne team, covering the whole West for the radar piece, but obviously the radar is part of an ecosystem and a multi-layered system as a foundational detection device. But yeah, Josh, just some comments, some thoughts, as you're listening in, and then I want to kind of springboard back into some of Greg's, some of the things you presented earlier, Greg, on counter UAS and TAC. But yeah, Josh, take it away.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of start off with what Michelle said about, TAC is only as useful as the data that's being put into it, right? So if there's a lot of drones flying around and you're not seeing them, and they're in the airspace, but they won't be displayed on TAC, right? So having that layered approach where you can see all the drones that are flying in the airspace, or even aircraft, because you may have helicopters. Let's say there's an emergency going on, the police are using their helicopter, and you're trying to fly your drone. You need to be able to know where that helicopter is, so you don't accidentally run into it, and you have that deconflicted airspace. So when you're looking at sensors, and just to give folks who maybe are a little bit new to sensors or don't know what the different sensors are for, you have a few different types. So kind of the first active sensor would be a radar. That's kind of shows you everything in the airspace. It's kind of the foundation for deconflicting the airspace, because you need to know everything, including drones, aircraft, manned aircraft, and also drones that are flying but aren't obeying all the rules, right? So if they're flying dark, if they're, maybe, if it's a nefarious actor that might be flying it tethered on a fiber optic cable, or on waypoints where it won't be emitting any signal, right? So you need to be able to see everything in the airspace to really have that control and be able to say, where it's safe to be flying your own drones. And then when you start layering things on top of that, your remote ID or RF detection is kind of that next layer. And they're kind of starting to become a little bit similar, or even people are saying that remote ID is quickly overtaking RF detection, because essentially remote ID is showing you the license plate of the drone, right? So those are folks who are legally flying, and it'll give you a really good idea of, like you saw in that picture, some data about the drone, what kind of drone it is, and also sometimes we'll show you where the location of the pilot is. And when you pair that with the radar, it allows you to start doing some, we might call deconfliction. So if you see the drone on there in the radar and then you pull it up on the remote ID, you're probably dealing with maybe somebody who's flying where they're not supposed to be, but they might not be a bad actor, right? But if you start seeing the drone showing up on the radar, but it's not showing up on the remote ID detection, that's kind of a red flag of, hey, this is a dark drone flying and there's no reason for them to be doing that. So, it automatically allows you to go into that more defensive posture. So, it really gives you, having those layered detection pieces gives you a lot of ability to know what's in the airspace and be safe when you're flying your own drone, or you're trying to create that safe airspace to allow helicopters and other manned aircraft to be operating in the same environment as drones. It gives you that ability to see everything in the airspace. And just as another layer on top of that, a lot of folks will use cameras as well, to where when a drone flies into that airspace, it'll be cue the camera to zoom in, and you can get additional data on the drone, and maybe even run some analytics and things like that. And then, when we're talking about, that's all defensive, right? That's giving you deconflicting the airspace.
Totally.
But when we talk about the other side, which is maybe countering the drone, and obviously right now, currently, it's not legal to do that. But once, folks get that authority to counter drones, you need to make sure you're taking on the right drone, right? If you have sensors up there and they're showing you some of the drones in the airspace, and you use some countermeasures, and you actually knock down the fire department's drone, the police drone, and half the media team's drones, it could be a problem. So having that, along with TAC and utilizing radar to really pinpoint those nefarious drones, so that way whatever mitigation options you use can really be effective. So I think that was a really important point that Michelle brought up, is just knowing everything in the airspace, both all the good actors and the nefarious actors, really gives you that clear picture so the air boss can make those informed decisions.
That's good, Josh. I'm going to just highlight, that's beautiful. And Emily Limpert asked the question that you answered here, is TAC showing non-compliant drones yet? And that was while Greg was showing the compliant drone with the remote ID. But of course, then with radars, you're able to pop up those indications of the non-compliant as well. But thanks, Emily. And she also asked, I tried to pull it up while you were talking midstream, where do you see EOIR cameras playing, DAA playing a role in this long term? I don't know. Maybe you're talking about in the air, Emily. I'm not sure, because I think we were with Lighthouse Avionics, so you may be talking about like DAA in flight with cameras. I'm not sure, but Josh did mention the ground-based camera sensor that pairs with the radar. There's a lot of directions we could take this, but anyways, thanks for interacting. Thanks for the comments. Great points, Josh. I thought that was really well spoken. Did you have any last thoughts? And then Greg, I'd love you to kind of spin off of what Josh was sharing and share a little bit more about how all these sensors and TAC come together. But Josh, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to, you're answering lots of questions that are being asked, and I appreciate our audience. But Josh, any last thoughts?
Problem. Yeah, I just think the last thing is, as we're getting this posture of looking towards mitigation, because I know that's been one thing that's been discussed a lot around FIFA, is the potential for more agencies to receive the authority to mitigate. I think it becomes more and more important to talk about deconflicting the airspace and having that layer detection with TAC, because the last thing we want to do is be using some of these mitigation authorities poorly. And the best way to do something poorly is to start taking down things where you're blind, right? And having that clear, visible airspace with radars, that foundation, but then having those other pieces to give you that additional deconfliction is going to be very important. And ultimately, the first step towards mitigation is always going to be deterrence. And you can, when you have that awareness of the airspace, you can create deterrence by talking to people who are flying around a site that maybe they're not supposed to be at, right? If they're in the park and they're flying it, but it's not, where they're supposed to be, you can dispatch somebody to talk to them, right? So having that first layer of deterrence is only possible when you have that airspace awareness and utilizing TAC to be able to see where all those players are and communicate it with the right people, right? So if you have your own private sensors, we want to let the police know, where that bad actor is. You can share that data through TAC, and it really gives, everybody in that area, just makes them safer and better able to secure the airspace and make everybody safer. But yeah, go ahead, Greg, or David, if you want to queued up for him.
Yeah, I just want to mention that the whole counter or mitigation side of being able to take down the drone, or Emily has commented a little bit more about like using using light to kind of dazzle the drone and confuse it. Oh, that just popped off the screen. Sorry. But then she brought back, yeah, that's only for DoD, not legal yet for commercial use, because you are disrupting an aircraft, as Michelle said. Drones are certified as an aircraft in the National Airspace System by the FAA. So you are essentially breaking federal law to aim a laser at an aircraft. But I just want to say, and then I'm going to give it to you, Greg. The mitigation side is really interesting right now as we speak. Within the last few days, practically, a handful of state law enforcement agencies were trained, and I hear whispers of the fact that they may be able to become a force multiplier on some level to the FBI and federal agencies. And I'll try not to make too firm of a statement on that, but I know that there's a mission right now as legislation is still trying to be pushed through that would really fully enable. But I do believe, Josh, that mitigation is starting to pressure downward to the state law enforcement agencies, potentially for the FIFA World Cup games. Oh, Michelle, I'm sorry, Greg. Michelle,
Can I
please
make us one quick comment on that, David? Before
yeah, and then whenever you can, Greg, take it away. Go for
I
it.
just want to say
Go ahead.
real quick, I think a lot of people, they'll get caught up in the idea of these forms of detection having airspace awareness are only useful for mitigation. But reality, when you have mitigation authority, deterrence will still be the first step, right? You don't want to just be shooting things down. They're always going to want you to deter and to create that safe airspace before you start shooting things down willy-nilly. So the importance of having this layer detection now and utilizing TAC to coordinate those efforts to create deterrence is going to be the first step to any mitigation. So I think a lot of folks get so caught up in the mitigation side, they don't realize they already have a lot of tools at their fingertips to make safe airspace now with what's available. So definitely, look to the detection and get that side down so you can create deterrence before you even start thinking about mitigation, because that is a very powerful tool set you already have.
Love it. Greg's loving it. Michelle, last comments, and then Greg, I really would love you to take it away, even pull up some slides.
Let Greg go. I'll close up later.
Okay, perfect.
We have a new dog, and whenever we take the dog for a walk, he's like so excited. I'm that dog right now. Yes, please let me at it. Okay, look, everyone, forget mitigation. You're not going to do mitigation. Like, it's off the table. Like, we're never going to get to that point, right? There's so many variables, right? So,
like what? Like what? Why? I mean, people are hungry for this one.
I understand. Everyone wants to go shoot down a drone, but just imagine shooting anything down. Imagine we're in the city right now, and a drone is a threat. What am I shooting at? There's a building, there's people. Where's the drone going to land? What is the drone carrying? So I've worked with a couple of the response agencies out here, specifically the Federal Air Marshal Service, and they have a saying, they made it very clear. They're like, what is the pucker factor? Right? Because I only have so many resources. Even if I had the mitigation authority, let me show you a chart. Let me do my Ross Perot impression right now. Let me show you a chart. I'm sharing my screen. This is one day in San Francisco. This isn't even all of San Francisco. One day, 50 drones, 50 drones, one day. Might have been a weekend, but whatever, 2 days, right? Are you going to mitigate all of those? No, you're not. Are you going to chase down all? No. What are your resource constraints? You have 1 or 2 ground intercept teams, right? So what's important for those ground intercept teams? What is the drone? What is the threat from the drone, right? If we're talking about like a mini doesn't have a payload capacity. What's the worst a mini is going to do? Right? It might be doing surveillance. It might be bootlegging your show or your concert or whatever. But the payload, there is no payload capacity. I might go send a ground intercept team to make contact with that operator, but it's not as big of a threat as, say, like a Matrice or a big honkin' drone that has a payload capacity. That's the thing that I'm going to respond to. But even then, right, if this thing's flying over a crowd, what are my cost benefit here, right? If I shoot it down over a crowd, have I now created a new hazard? There's a saying, and I hate the way that they worded it, but it makes sense, right? If there's a fire and I need to evacuate people, I now own that responsibility, right? I own both taking care of those people that I've evacuated and their house. So think about drone mitigation the same way, right? If there's a threat in the air and I take action against it, guess what? I'm 100% responsible now. If I'm driving an ambulance and I'm going through code 3, I'm responsible no matter what happens, right? So that's why I say put that off to the side. For now, focus on what is the minimum I can do to respond to that threat. Send a ground intercept team, right? I can have people hump out there, make contact with the operator, inform them, preferably nicely, that, hey, don't do this shit, right? You didn't look at your NOTAMs, you didn't look at your TFRs, you're violating an airspace right now. Here's your warning. Don't do it again, or we'll take your stuff away, right? That's the most effective thing you could do in this environment. The other thing I'll say is, anyone who's telling you that they have a single solution that will solve all of this for you is selling you bullshit, right? There is no solution that's going to take care of this. Yeah, remote ID is going to get the compliant drones, right? Radar is going to get everything the radar can see, right? Your group 1 through group 3 UAS, depending on the cross section of the radar and the radar's effectiveness and whether or not we can get a special use permit for the radar. EO and IR are going to be key here, because again, I might get a ping, I might get a hit. What is it? Is it carrying something? Is it a big drone? Is it a small drone? Is it a bird? I need that secondary verification for that. And then beyond that, there's a bunch of other modalities that I could use, right? Other types of RF sensors, optical sensors, acoustic sensors. Everything should be in play. The problem is we don't yet have a multi-track correlation system for this yet, right? I like to say that we use the meat-based track correlation system, the one we have pre-installed up here. That's the best we can do right now without swiping this card and spending, a defense contractor's amount of money to get that capability. So I just want to weigh in on that. Like, yeah, we'll get to mitigation, but like, don't get hung up on deploying this capability because you're waiting for mitigation to happen. Mitigation is your feet right now.
That's good, Michelle.
I want to have like 6 hours with these two on another podcast, or we'll call it a mini movie. I don't care. TV show. This is the kind of conversation we have to be having, that we have to be sharing. So what I wanted to say earlier, and now is just as good of a time, is that TAC is forming that foundation, that fabric across all of these systems. You can import all of those systems into TAC for a visualization of what is where, what you're seeing, where you are, where all of your assets are. Whether you turn that on or off, if it becomes part of a layered system, as Josh was saying, and Greg was just saying, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. We're going to have certain people that are going to have certain authorities to be able to do certain things that are going to be important to getting to a safe solution, whatever the problem is. The problem might be drones. It might be something else that's on the ground. And we as aviators, we've got to stay away from that area. Even if we are within the public safety community and there's something going on the ground, we may cause confusion by sending our drones in. The air boss needs all of that. And then we can execute smartly with the right intelligence that each of us need within the domain that we're in. So TAC is, in my mind, becoming that fabric across all of these different elements of the solution. And we keep circling back to big events, and we put this around FIFA, and that's cool. But think bigger. Think bigger than that. Think enterprise. Think all of the NAS, the entire United States, having all of that data curated into a way that makes meaningful intelligence for each of those operators who have that layer in whatever their situational display happens to be. For me as an aviator, I probably wouldn't have TAC as my main situational display. I'd have an ASD or a TSD or something that works for me. However, I'd have that layer, and I'd be able to turn that layer on when I needed that broader SA. And it gives me what I need for my decision-making. And that data that I have can be shared back down that pipe, back into TAC for those boots on the ground folks who may need some level of what's going on above them. Not all of it, but whatever's meaningful for them to make their own decisions. It's a fabric. I think that we're onto something, and because they're following MOSA, we have it in an affordable way to do all of this exploration. That's what I wanted to say.
That's great. And And really, it's like, well, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was like right in the middle because I had a baby crying in the other room. But yeah, I kind of just think about the different apps I use on the map. Whether it's pulling up Waze, to look at how the traffic's really going to look or whatever. But then you kind of have your common ones that show everything in one spot. Even just as a consumer, and so it's kind of similar to that, where you can still get your purpose-built features out of a given system. For example, okay, if you just take my radar and you plug it straight in to TAC, you're gonna ultimately show everything in TAC, and you might not want to see everything. You might want to just see particular size, speed. You might want to just see drones, not helicopters. You might want to, there may be a whole slew of things that you want to turn on and off, and therefore running those radars through not just the meat processor, as you said, Greg, but running them through C2 platforms that have been highly tuned to be able to comb through radar data, map that to EOIR cameras, map that to camera analytics, map that to all sorts of other sensors, and put that all together, and then send only validated information up the chain to the common operating picture that everyone's looking at. Right, that seems to be the path, and that's why I can, that's why TAC is so helpful, because we can sort of resell all these platforms to 7 different agencies at a given city, but then they could take all their validated points, they could leverage their own platforms real time, and then they could push everything validated up to one screen. And then, as Michelle said, as needed, when they look at a map view, they can look at TAC, right? I think that's pretty cool. It'll enable my radars to be so much more useful instead of, just disparate systems. They all need to work together. Why not? If all these agencies are buying my platform, and they all have, someone has mobile, someone has fixed, someone has this coverage, someone has that coverage, shouldn't they all be able to benefit from that? That's why, I believe in it too. I mean, in that way. So
David, I wanted to give everyone, listening, or everyone interested, I don't want to call it homework, but like an exercise, right? And this is a recurring theme that we've seen. We're going to roll out drone detection. I'm going to call it counter UAS, but I'm talking about detection and track, right? We're going to roll it out to an AO for an event next week. Cool. What does that AO look like right now? Right? Because I might be rolling out that detection and track next week. I'm going to start picking up everyone in the neighborhood who likes to fly their drone on the weekend, right? If I don't know that ahead of time, I've now created a cognitive overload for my operators, right? You need to get a baseline today. You need to start baselining today. So take whatever capability you have right now, even if it's only for compliant drones, and start getting that baseline. Because guess what? Your neighbor loves to film themselves surfing every day with their drone, right? Leave them alone, right? They're probably fine. Go make contact with them, let them know what's happening, or just be aware that they're in your airspace. You don't want to wait until the event is happening. You don't want to wait until you're under duress to start chasing that thread to realize, oh, it's not a threat. It's just Bob. He likes to surf, right? But unless you're doing that now, you're not going to know. And then you're going to try to do it under duress. That's one, right? 2 is, how are you going to do that? Again, what's the best camera? The one you have on you. Start doing it today. Get an app on your phone to start looking at some of these compliant drones. A, it'll give you awareness of your airspace and a baseline. B, you'll start training your mind on like, hey, what does a drone flight look like, right? What does a threatening flight look like? What does a real estate shot look like, right? Get those in your mind. Start training yourselves on those so that when it comes later, when the real event is happening, you could very easily decorrelate that in your mind and be like, oh, that's not a threat. I know, that's Bob. He likes to surf. Not a big deal. I told him not to fly on the weekend, right?
So I'm going to interject here for a second, Greg. It's not a problem unless Bob is a silent plant and Bob is really a terrorist, right? In the commercial side, there are multiple checks that they're building into these UTM systems that will allow a higher level of credibility for those compliant drones. So Bob, if he's registered his drone and he's got remote ID and he's flying in the right airspace at the right altitudes at the right time of day with the correct proximity from concerns, then, and Bob has a history, then Bob is probably okay. But, if Bob just has remote ID, it doesn't necessarily mean Bob's okay. So that's what I mean by layers. The commercial side is going to have that deeper level of aviation pedigree that would be able to inform the view on the TAC that our public safety people will say. And maybe it's something just like your light in the background. It's a red, yellow, green. This guy is yellow. We've got a little bit on him, but not real sure. Or this guy is green. We got all his history on him. He's fine. That kind of stuff you don't need to be bothered with, but the commercial industry is absolutely going to be tracking all that. And that can come to you as some kind of indicator.
That's a good point, right? We keep talking about this as this like all drones are a threat, or that we need to be worried about all drones. My thing here is I'm with you, right? I think drones are going to be a panacea, right? It's great that we have self-driving cars. Great. I don't want any more cars on the road, right? If we can have drones start replacing some of, like if we have drones do delivery, hell yeah. Like let's enable that in the airspace. What do we need to do that safely? Right? This isn't just about like keeping drones away from stuff. It's how do we allow drones to deconflict and operate in a busy environment? We have DFR drones, we have delivery drones, we have tactical drones, we have real estate drones, we have randos just flying with, their kids on the weekend. Great. They should all be able to share this airspace. 100%.
That's great. And I know we're after the hour here. Hopefully you guys aren't late to another meeting, but there was a podcast I listened to recently about a pretty big incident you guys would all be aware of that could have been resolved pretty quickly if there was a drone in the air for the security team. And what this is making me think of, it was all the laws. It was the state law, or the law of that particular city, that the security team wasn't allowed to fly during that time, even though they had Part 107 licenses and drones. It was, it was like lack of, interoperable agreements with like a certain law enforcement agency that also had drones that could have worked with them, them and flown their drones because they were legal. It was just such a mismatch or a hodgepodge, whatever you want to call it, of different agencies, different rules, all these things. If we can come together, bring the technology together, right, and work together, we could not just be able to start shooting everybody down, but we could at least have issues like that example not happen, where it's at least we've got a baseline and we've worked together and we have a baseline of what good drone flights look like, Greg, right? And then we could build from that. We could at least have drones in the air for like the most important things and not get stopped by all the kind of mess of nothing working together. Yeah. Any final comments? I just wanted to throw up one comment from my buddy Zeb Nadler. He said a little bit ago, I was trying to sneak it in there, but he said this is why detection and mitigation are, oh wait, that was actually the wrong one, but good points here. Further broken down into detect, track, classify, mitigate. Interdiction and interview are good for civilians and SLTT at this time. But he mentioned somewhere in here, one of his comments about remote ID being like a base layer that you can bring to the table. I think it's here, as you're saying, Greg, just to get something up at a low cost to start to get situational awareness of your airspace. Before everybody drops, I know we're way past, but please reach out to AJ and Greg if you are looking to deploy TAC, or you need training, you need help, you need resources, for any reason, but especially with the World Cup coming to your city or the Olympics coming after that. They're the experts in the industry. Thank you guys for taking the time to come on with us. And of course, Michelle, for all things aviation, integrating drones into the national airspace, interoperability, actually deploying, the infrastructure to make this whole future actually a reality. Myself and Josh, if you're looking for detection, especially radars, as these games are coming and you need to submit for your grants. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time so much. I mean, we could have kept going, I think, for another hour easily. Thanks for all the comments, everybody. That was a great episode. It'll stay recorded in line, or up the recording, for in perpetuity if you guys want to reshare it. Someone asked about that earlier. And go to thisweekindrones.com/connect. Fill out a little form there if you want to stay connected, if you want to be on the future podcasts, or if you have questions about what we talked about. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. We'll see you again next week. Happy Thanksgiving.